Dr. Bren here. Today's video, we're going to talk about how to become a divine feminist. I'm going to take you through 3 movements. One is called dark bonding, the other is wounding, which is known as the Me Too, and the final is redemption, which I'm calling Me One. But first we're going to talk about Jungian archetypes of the psyche so that you have some context for what this video is about. I hope you enjoy it. Namaste.
Why are you calling it the Divine Feminist movement?
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of connect this to the next stage of what's happening in the Me Too movement, right? So the Me Too movement kind of, and then the election of Trump sort of brought this rage of the feminist movement to the forefront again. And I think that was a super important stage, that women voices are heard and that our wounding has been recognized. And so that's part of the reason why I'm using the term feminist, is because I want it to be part of that, but the next stage. Even though I know that term sometimes can really rub people the wrong way, I kind of want it to be a little bit provocative, and I want us to proudly wear this term, I am a divine feminist, right? And then the divine part is the most important part. The feminist part is important in order to separate and understand the wounding, but the divine part is for us all to come to terms with we're both masculine and feminine. So that's what I mean by the divine part. And so putting those terms together in a lot of ways, I feel, is a little bit of a cognitive dissonance. And in a sense, that's what I'm trying to do, is I wanna create that cognitive dissonance so that we can come out of the idea that the feminist needs to be angry, right? Or needs to be fighting. But what if we come into it, no, we need to be our whole selves, and embracing and taking back our power and taking back the qualities of the masculine that we've projected outside of us, and then we're, begging for it back, right?
So I wanted to get a little deeper into this topic, but first, maybe to put some context around what we're talking about, maybe you could explain to me and us the main archetypes of the Jungian psyche.
Yeah, I think that's a really important place to start. I think the way that Jung worked was very much in 4s, and so he divided the sense of self or identity between 2 archetypes: the ego, or the self, and the shadow. And so those 2 represent who I think I am, so identity axis. And so the way that works is, who I think I am, that's myself, and who I think I'm not, that's my shadow. And so there's just like this process of me, not me, creating the shadow and the conscious part of ourselves. The other important and little known axis is the vertical axis of the 4 main archetypes. And that's the persona, which is the face that we show the outside world. And that usually is your main gender. So female, feminine. So my persona would be feminine because my sex is female. That's not always the case, but for me, that's the case. Then the face that I turn to the inside world is the opposite, the contrarian gender, which is animus for females, right? And then for men, their sex is male. The face they turn to the outside world, their persona, will be masculine. And so their inside personality is feminine, or anima, right? And so what this means is that the unconscious, which is the face of the internal world, is colored feminine, has the characteristics of the, similar to the shadow, the parts that I don't identify with from a gender perspective, from a social perspective. This is the social horizontal axis. The identity axis is what I was talking about together, and they get blended into what the unconscious is. It's, for men, it's a more feminine, rejected parts of myself, and for a woman, it's the sort of more masculine, rejected parts of myself.
You've separated this divine feminist movement into 3 different parts, and I wanted to touch on those. And we were just talking about them a little bit, but I want you to explain just these 3 parts a little bit more. The first is dark bonding, which we kind of touched on, like, okay, the self and the shadow, the ego and the shadow, and the persona of the male, female. It's what we don't want. And then so that's dark bonding, wounding, and redemption. Those are the 3 phases. Can we talk a little bit more about the dark bonding? So it's all the things that we don't want, and then it shows up anyways in our unconscious. What's the bonding part?
Yeah, and that's such a great question. I love the way you set that up. The bonding is in the projection, the unwanted projections on both sides, the masculine and the feminine. So if I sort of like go, here's this darkness of this other character, this masculine, I'm going to project it outside of myself, and then I'm going to yearn for it. I'm going to bond with it in a toxic kind of way, but I'm going to yearn for it, right? Or I'm going to be victim of it, or whatever. And that's the dark bonding that we're seeing a lot. And the way it's expressing a lot in relationships is between the empath and the narcissist, right? We're seeing a lot of that, more so than ever. And I see that as a dark bonding. The empath is a little bit of a toxic feminine, and the narcissist a little bit of the toxic masculine, although it's not always male and female in that way. But for our discussions, we're going to say it that way. And what I see a lot in that particular movement is a demonization, is that a word? Of the toxic masculine, or the narcissist, and the wrong redemption and the wrong separation of the empath. I'm seeing that in a movement, and I'd like to see us better understand it as dark bonding. Both are toxic, and then how do we? And this video is really just about the redemption of the feminine side of this, right?
Okay.
So does that make sense? I mean, what I'm trying to say is that both are projecting parts of themselves that are not owned. And because of that, there's a bonding. And I'm calling it dark bonding because it's toxic.
And the yearning is just another way for yourself to say, I want to be whole and pay attention to me. And then you yearn for it. It shows up in your life anyway, because you're not paying attention to it.
Right. And that's the divine lesson here. That's our opportunity on earth in duality, is to learn to take back all of our projections, shadow projections and gender projections. And so that sort of bonding, that dark bonding, or whatever bonding it isn't there for us to marry our prince or our princesses and to live happily ever after. That may have been in the last century. That's not the century we're in right now. The century we're in right now is about learning to become whole, right?
Exactly. Which is why we're in this place we are in right now, the gender wars. So the next movement the next phase that the feminist movement needs to flow through after the dark bonding is the wounding. And can we talk about how do we get to this place, and what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the wounding is the Me Too movement for females. I think that them having a voice all of us having a voice for the wounding is, pretty much what the Me Too movement is about. And I think it's important to understand that the males are wounded too. The narcissist is wounded too. Although it's not going to be popular to say this, but it will make sense that if the male has projected his feminine outside of him on the female, then the wounding for that, the narcissist, is that he can't manipulate and control the female. Like, why isn't she doing what I want her to do? That control and domination, for that to blow up, is a wounding, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a little bit of what's not being understood on the other side. I think we pretty much know what's going on in Me Too. That control and domination is what the female is going, no, stop. No more, sexual misconduct or whatever it happens to be. And so that wounding is that wounding is obvious, right? It's obvious, and it's everywhere. I don't know very many women who haven't been affected in one way or another by this misconduct. Almost everybody, almost every girl, every woman, in one way or another. It's horrific. And so but my point is, let's go on to the next stage, right? But let's also stop demonizing the other side, right? Because it's just as important that the narcissists kind of wake up and go, wow, the whole world isn't me. It isn't, and I can't control it all and manipulate it all, right? They have to wake up to that as well.
Would you say that the wounding is part of the separation aspect of the movement? It's saying, okay, collecting us all together and saying, this is what's going on. Where's our anger coming from? Oh, it's from our, shadow or, thrown away persona. Okay, can we take that back? So that's what you're saying the movement really is about, is taking our power back so that we can move on to the next phase and not stay in the victim mode. The next phase being redemption, which is going to lead us to our whole selves, our divine divinity, So we understand the wounding. What does the redemption look like?
I think the redemption is really understanding how everything that does get put into the shadow or rejected as a contrasexual image that doesn't fit my persona is fear. Everything is fear, what I call fear-based creations. And redemption to me is about going through all of those fear-based creations that created your lower self and releasing them. Because part of what we have to learn is to come into our divine self, and for what we're calling right now the divine feminist self, and learn to create from or within love. Like, part of why there's a gender war to begin with is that it's based on the frustration of the unmet love object that's not doing what I want it to do, right? And so we're coming out of that understanding, that old school understanding, I would say, of love, that love is something outside of me that I need to go and pursue, that love is my divine essence, right? That love is, if I want love outside of me, this is the separation. I need to come in and I need to go, wait a minute, my whole field needs to be in the frequency of love. And if I'm creating in the frequency of love, then I'm going to attract love all around me. To me, that's the lesson. That's the lesson, and that's the redemption. The redemption of the dark bonding and the wounding is coming to understand that.
You coined the term or the hashtag #Me1, which I love because it's asking us to come out of the Me Too, almost like two duality, because that's part of the process, which we spoke about, but moving forward, keep going into self-realization, wholeness, one, me one. I love that. I really do.
And me too, because I think that what I'm not saying is that we stay there, but we want adults. I think at this point we need to be adults, and we need to have adult relationships. And the relationships of tomorrow are two whole people coming together to create a third. That two eyes creating a we. That third is that one mind that is kind of a break off of unity consciousness, which is what we're trying to go to. I need to be unity consciousness in Bren, but I also then need to join up with other unity consciousness so that we can become a collective unity consciousness. That's the only way we're going to be able to solve the problems on this planet, is if we take ownership and power of the one mind that is already created, but it's created in the dark bonding. So we've been just talking about this in little pieces, but in the bigger piece, we have a massive unity mind created from fear. And we need to combat the problem out there in the world with the things that we're, not doing right, and by creating consciously this unity consciousness in the frequency of love.
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, you stepped back and you realized you created almost everything out of fear. And so that's the first step, and it starts with the individual. And if we start doing this work, we'll have so many more leaders to look up to and guides to show us. It's just taking that first step of the courage of doing your own work.
It is courage. Courage is the most important. It's so much easier to sit back, feel like you're a victim of, the toxic masculine or Trump or whatever you want to project it on, and not take responsibility. But the responsibility starts with your own self. And if all of us did this, the world would be changed in an instant.
How incredible and hopeful. Which is why the wounding and separation is so important.
It is, and it's also really important that we don't scapegoat the male, because if we scapegoat the male, this spiral will not be going up. The spiral will be going down.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we scapegoat the male and we don't go, oh no, you're in this too. You've also been wounded. We're all wounded. We're all needing to come out of this and really connect in with our own higher self that is, as we're saying today, genderless. Right? If we don't come together as brothers and sisters in this, then we are not progressing.
Right. We both need to separate for a little bit.
Separate and become whole, come back together as adults and spiritual partners, and creating the world that we want.
Right.
Together.
Right. Out of love.
Out of love and in love and all of that, right?